following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
We are back, in case you're wondering, with George Case. George is here. How are you, sir?
Just fine, thank you.
Good. We've been talking with David Hubler and Ron Rabinovitz. I'm Ralph Tyko. Off the air a little bit about the weather conditions in the United States, and I'm certainly glad we have this show so we could talk about our old memories and what have you, because what's going on is horrible for you guys, you Easterners and Midwesterners. You've been suffering, and it's been a long winter of suffering. Is this the last storm? Is spring on the way?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, it certainly should be the last storm. But on the other hand, I was looking at a long-range forecast, and now they're talking about another storm coming. So, you know, I don't know. All I can tell you, here in the Northeast, it is not baseball weather.
No,
well,
right.
I'll tell you what, in Arizona,
or in Minnesota
not necessarily baseball
right.
weather either. Is that Chad?
That was Ronnie, I think.
I thought I heard another voice come
It was Ronnie talking about the snow in Minnesota not being baseball weather.
Oh.
Yeah, it's going to be 50 today, so that's nice.
But I did a show with Michael Duca, who's an official scorer for baseball, and he's down in Arizona. And the weather as of Friday was under 70 degrees. For highs
really?
in Arizona.
Yeah.
So I wonder how this is going to affect the season. Guys not getting in shape, this, that, and the other thing.
Well, you know, that's pretty cold. That's pretty cold for Arizona and Florida. I mean, you know, ball players, you know, they enjoy playing in the, you know, 70s, high 70s, low 80s. I mean, that's baseball weather, Florida and Arizona. You get below 70. It's a little bit cool, and you get some arm problems if they're not loosened up properly.
Okay.
I think Florida's been having really good weather.
That's a very good segue.
Yeah.
Because we're going to talk about nicknames of baseball players, but I want to know where the nickname Dog Days of Summer came in for baseball.
I think it's more widely spread than just baseball.
With the Dog Days of Summer?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's more generic than just baseball.
Okay, because I always heard the Dog Days of Summer. Did your dad talk about that, George?
Well, you know, I've heard that. You know, I've heard the phrase, and I think it might have had something to do at one point with baseball, because you know, when it was played in the summertime, especially in those areas where, you know, hot and humid, and you're playing in wool flannel uniforms, you know, certainly, you know, your tongues are out, you're panting, you know, because it is really hot. So, you know, that might have had some mention toward baseball, but I think, as it's also been talked about, it has to do with, you know, the entire summer season when you do have heat and humidity. But certainly, you know, baseball in the old days was affected. There was no air conditioning in the dugouts. Players, my dad told me personally, he said, you know, the players back then, to stay cool, the trainers would always have a big bucket of ice, and they would have cabbage leaves inside the bucket of ice. They would then take the cabbage leaves, put them inside their hats to take out on the playing field with them.
Wow.
You want to hear something quite interesting? I just Googled Dog Days of Summer, and it actually goes, according to this, it comes from the ancient Greek beliefs about a star. So it's a lot earlier than just baseball. The ancient Greeks.
Now, David, is that a star, a constellation?
Yeah. I'm just here. The ancient Greeks thought of the constellation Canis Major,
right,
the dog chasing Lepus, the hare. The star Sirius is the dog's nose, and the Greeks called it a dog star. So It must,
well, that certainly
the
predates baseball then.
Yeah, well, maybe not. We don't know for sure.
That's right.
You know, the Greeks might have had a version.
They could have had the bags out there and
right.
Ready to
They
go.
were smart people. The Greeks were very smart and creative, so you never know.
Right.
Well, you mentioned the Greek star, and we're talking nicknames. So I want to talk Harry Aganis. Was he called the Greek god?
Yes, he was. He was called the Greek.
Yeah. The Golden Greek, yeah.
Right.
The Golden Greek. He's a little before my conscious time. So I'd like
mine too.
Well, I guess that makes me a really old guy because I remember him.
You remember him? He got sick, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, he passed away very early. I think he had cancer or something because I think it was maybe at the end of his career or just after he stopped playing that he passed away. So yeah, he did have a very early premature death. You know, very similar to say like Lou Gehrig. I mean, they were pretty much in their prime years, and all of a sudden they're stricken with a horrible disease.
Where did he play? I remember
he played
the name,
for the Red Sox. He was a first baseman for the Red Sox.
Oh, okay.
Early 50s, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
Okay. You mentioned Lou Gehrig, Larapin Lou.
Right.
That was his nickname.
That was one of his nicknames. And I wanted to bring this up, and I'm glad we're talking about this because there are some nicknames that are players' nicknames, and then there are some nicknames that are given to a player by a certain writer or fans or whatever. You know, Lou Gehrig. The great book written about him, The Iron Horse, and Lou. When he went to Columbia, there's pictures of Lou, and one of his nicknames was Columbia Lou. Then you look at a contemporary of his, obviously, George Herman Ruth. Everybody knows him as Babe Ruth. Well, where'd that nickname come from? Now, the writers give him a nickname, the Sultan of Swat or the Bambino. I'm not sure that anybody ever went up to Babe Ruth and say, "Hey, Babe, how are you? Nice to meet you, Bambino." But that was the name that was given to him by I think probably a sports writer.
It would have been the sports writers because they were always looking for alliterative names and place names, to associate with the ball players. The Kentucky Colonel was Pee Wee Reese, and obviously the ball players didn't. They had nicknames. You're right. The ball players had nicknames with each other, but it was the sports writers who were trying to, constantly write copy.
Right.
And then the announcers, because Mel Allen gave Tommy Henrik the name Old Reliable.
Right.
I'm sure the players didn't call him Old Reliable.
No, I'm sure they didn't. So, I mean, just like when my dad was playing. I mean, Charlie Gehringer was known as the Mechanical Man. Well, I'm sure that my dad and the other players who played against Gehringer didn't say, "Hey, Mechanical Man, good to see you again." I mean, it was
Did
Charlie.
Your dad have a nickname? Did your dad have a nickname, George?
My dad's nickname is the same as mine, which was really Casey for Casey at the bat. It was very easy, Ronnie, because all we had to do was put the letter Y, but it was tied into baseball.
Well, any ball player who came out of Kansas City was a KC, and like Mantle.
Casey Stengel.
Mantle was Casey Stengel, exactly.
Right.
Mantle was the Commerce Kid.
Right.
The alliteration was what the sports writers went for.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that, David.
I'm going to ask Ronnie Rabinovitz, the Jackie Robinson maven, let's just say, a good friend of Jackie's. I don't remember any nickname for Jackie Robinson.
No, there wasn't, except lousy ones, that they call them, bigots that call them.
Oh, they called them a lot.
Yeah, they called them a lot, yeah.
Well, a lot of players like Jackie, a lot of players like Jackie just would go by the name Jackie, and everybody would know who that was. So
Right.
What did Rachel call Jackie?
Jack.
Honey.
Jack.
Jack Honey.
Never Jackie. It was Jack.
Okay, because
and he called her Ray.
Short for Rachel, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But she never called him Jackie. To this day, she always calls him Jack.
Interesting. Let's go around the room, and we'll start with you, David. Your favorite nickname for a ball player, one that, an early one that you remember as a kid.
Well, that's funny because as I even told my namesake, a lot of the guys called me Mudcat. Like when we had Mudcat Grant on, and
right.
and that was my nickname for some inexplicable reason. I have no idea what it was, and for the life of me, I can't even remember if we asked him how he got his nickname. But that was the one I remember most. Other than that, I mean, I didn't have any speed, so they couldn't call me Speedy or anything like that. So.
Ronnie, did you have a nickname as a kid?
Yeah, they called me Speedy because I could hit a ball all the way to the wall and get to first base. I even stole a base one time because they never figured I'd steal. I kind of walked and took off.
Yeah, that was like, I think that was like Zig Benor or somebody that, never stole, and I think he wound up with one stolen base because he surprised everybody by running because,
I had power, but no speed.
Right.
All right. Let me ask how Charlie Hustle, Pete Rose, got his nickname. Was that another alliteration by the press, David?
No, not Charlie Hustle. I mean, if you watched him play, and I remember seeing him play in his rookie year, and I said, this guy is phenomenal. I mean, he just doesn't stop, and he just moves constantly.
Yes, he does. Yes, he does.
And he wasn't particularly fast, but he was, he was on base a lot. He was moving the ball. So that's where the name Hustle came from. And again, I'm sure none of the Cincinnati Reds called him Charlie Hustle.
Right.
No.
Hey, Charlie.
I mean, Billy Martin. Billy Martin's nickname was similar to that. What did they call Billy Martin? Remember? It was sort of like it was like Charlie Hustle, but it was like a reference to his playing style, if I recall.
Boy, it slips my mind.
Yeah,
it slips my mind too. But Billy Martin was very aggressive, and
right.
just like Pete Rose. I mean, they're very aggressive on the field.
Right. That's what
I'm not. I don't recall Billy's nickname, but it probably had something to do with his aggressiveness.
It did. Yeah. The one nickname I remember that. The one nickname that I remember that really applied to him was Leo the Lip DeRocha.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
Or
right.
Lippy. They called him Lippy.
Yeah.
But, Billy was a nickname. His real name was Alfred Martinez, I think, Martin. But
Really?
Billy itself.
I never knew that.
Yeah, and when he was estranged from his own dad, and we've had Billy Martin Jr. on the show. Billy Martin Jr. is named Billy. His real name is Billy, as opposed to Alfred, like his dad. So,
well, Mickey Mantle was Mickey. It was not Michael.
Right.
Right, exactly. After
It was Mickey,
who?
huh? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
His dad.
He was named after Mickey Cochran.
Right, he was.
And his dad had a nickname of Mutt Mantle.
Right.
Mutt,
Mickey Mantle's father admired Mickey Cochran, and that's where, when he named Mickey Mantle, he named him Mickey in honor of Mickey Cochran.
Nice, yeah. If you mention Mickey, you got to go to Willie, the Say Hey Kid.
Say Hey Kid.
And he's got other nicknames. Buck was his fellow players called him Buck for one reason or another.
Really?
Yeah, or Duck Butt too. That was another one of his.
I never heard that
players would call him.
Never heard that one either.
Yeah, he did indeed have kind of a duck butt, and
yeah.
Well, he was, Willie was very flamboyant, and he just loved to play. I mean, back in his younger days. Now, as he got older, he became very bitter about certain things, but, he just had a flamboyance about him. He loved to play, and, sort of like, like an Ernie Banks. I mean, Ernie Banks was, his nickname was Let's Play 2. I mean,
yes.
that's what he was known as. And I mean, I'm sure the players didn't call him Let's Play 2, but the sports writers, I mean, they loved it because he had such a love of the game. And on a day, it was a nice day for baseball, Ernie would say, Let's Play 2.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of his teammates didn't agree with that sentiment.
Probably not. But on the other hand, today it'd be people would say, "What are you even talking about?" Because they don't even play 2 anymore.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Ralph, how did you get the name Ziggy?
Yes, that's a great all-time nickname. I just want to mention, you mentioned that, George, that Willie became embittered towards the end. And it wasn't really towards the end. It was right dab in the middle. When the Giants moved from New York to San Francisco, Willie was not at all accepted on or off the field. It happened to coincide with 1958 when Orlando Cepeda came up, and San Francisco Giant fans, and by the way, he's getting better. He had been very, very ill.
Yeah, I heard he was, right.
Yeah.
Had a heart problem.
Is he getting better?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Miraculously, he's on his way to recovering.
Oh, good.
Good.
But the Giants fans in San Francisco took to him as an original San Francisco Giant. They looked at Mays as a New York transplant, and it took the fans a long time to appreciate Willie. More so off the field. Willie could not buy a house in the neighborhood that he wanted to buy a house in San Francisco. And
wow, I never knew that.
Yeah, I didn't know that either. Yeah.
He was what they call redlined. And,
oh yeah, I've heard that term.
They have ways of doing things, and it coincides with how Boston treated Bill Russell, the way I look at it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of covert racism in the North that goes on. That, as far as I'm concerned, never having been black, it's difficult to say. But being Jewish, it's almost along the same lines.
Mm-hmm.
I'd almost prefer overt racism to covert racism.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know.
Well, you hear the story about Sammy Davis Jr. He got on the bus, and the bus driver says, "Hey, black boy, get to the back." He says, "No, you don't understand. I'm Jewish." He says, "In that case, get off."
That's a great story, Ronnie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now there's a man.
But Boston has always had a reputation for being racist. No, San Francisco, at least from our East Coast perspective, San Francisco, especially since the '60s, has always been this very liberal enclave, and I never associated San Francisco with any kind of racism at all. Maybe because I am from the East Coast.
So it's a union town. It was, and to a certain extent, still is very racist.
Really?
And now with gentrification, there are so few blacks in San Francisco. They've been forced out. The housing shortage and the rents and the mortgage out here, it's unbelievable. the middle class, and I'm sure it's that way across the country, the middle class is simply being forced out.
Right.
Well, I know from experience with my daughter living out there and the cost of living. I mean,
where does she live?
Absolutely horrendous.
Part of California?
She's in Northern California, in the Walnut Creek area, and it's an area that is very, very wealthy compared to other parts of the country. But on the other hand, I sent her a photograph of a house around here in eastern Pennsylvania, and she wrote back to me, said, Dad, that house would have cost 10 times what it cost in eastern Pennsylvania out here in San Francisco area.
I've heard that San Francisco is very expensive.
Yep.
Yeah. Right up there with the top 2 or 3. It is in the top 2 or 3 in terms of the cost of living.
Yep.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is due to the Silicon Valley.
Walnut Creek is right across a tunnel from where I live in Alameda in Northern California.
Yeah, I've been by Alameda, matter of fact, on the way to the SF airport. So, I think I know right where you are, Ralph. There's you can actually, I think you can probably see San Francisco airport right from where you live.
Yes, we can. Absolutely. Right. And we have a nice view of San Francisco itself and down the peninsula.
Right.
Absolutely. I'm kind of blessed. I live in a little town off Oakland. It's an island city, a man-made island, and the weather is about 10 degrees warmer than in San Francisco and 10 degrees colder than in Walnut Creek. Because your daughter lives in an area where it's warmer.
Yeah, it does get a lot warmer out there. I know, and there's also a lack of rain. And she often will tell me, said, Dad, we haven't seen rain in 6 months. I mean, here it seems to rain every other day, but out there there's very little rain. That's why you've had so many problems with fires.
With the fires, sure. Yeah,
we broke a drought last year, and we've had a very, very low rain count this year. So, it's always a problem. There's always something.
I was in San Francisco only once, Memorial Day time, and it was freezing in San Francisco.
Freezing. I was there once too. It was so
and
cold.
there was fog all over the place.
And windy.
And windy. And the only time I got to see like the bridge, the Golden Gate Bridge, I was in my hotel room and I was watching late in the evening an old episode of The Streets of San Francisco, and there was the bridge. That was the only shot I got to see it.
Yeah, a lot of times out there, you see the bridge, you see the top of the bridge, the rest of it is underneath the fog.
Yeah, yeah. Spend a lot of time in Lefty O'Doul's, by the way, O'Doul's down on Gary Street.
Now, there was a nickname.
Well, I was just going to say, there was a nickname, Lefty O'Doul, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, lefty is an easy one. I mean, left-handed ball player. Nobody gets called righty, though.
No, never. No.
No. The man with the array of nicknames, the Splinter, Ted Williams.
Yeah.
Right.
The Splendid Splinter, right.
Yep.
And where did that come from? I mean, what is a splinter?
Well, I don't know where it came from, except when he first came up, David, in 1939, he was very thin.
Word, David.
What's that? Yeah, it's an alliteration, of course. But I think George is hit on it. I think George is hit on it. He was
thin as a rail when he first came up.
Right.
Yeah.
And then he got names, I think some of them were self-imposed. Teddy Ballgame.
Yeah.
Teddy Ballgame.
I don't know if he called himself that. He was a man of extreme ego.
Well, I wrote an article for one of the baseball history. It's an online baseball museum called the National Pastime, and and they asked me to write an article, and I wrote an article, and that was the title of the article, More Than Just Teddy Ballgame, because it was talking about Ted Williams more than just as a player, but all the things he did for the Jimmy Fund, and he was very misunderstood. I mean, the writers in TED, they had a terrible vendetta against one another, but he did a lot of very wonderful things for kids with cancer in the Boston area. And he had a tremendous outside interest and made a lot of money from Sears, and he was a Hall of Fame fisherman. He was a great hunter, and I mean, but Ted Williams was what everybody thinks about as the greatest hitter ever, and maybe he was the last guy to ever hit 400 in 1941. But on the other hand, I mean, Ted was a great player who, if they said, he was very talkative when it came to baseball. I mean, he would talk hitting 24 hours a day if you let him.
He loved to go bone fishing down in the Florida Keys.
He sure did. Yep, he was an absolute marvel with a fly rod, and he was inducted into the Fly Fishing Hall of Fame as well as the Baseball Hall of Fame. And
he liked bone fishing, apparently, because that fish gives you a really good fight.
Yeah.
And that's what he liked, the battle.
And it takes a lot of hand-eye coordination because you have to lay the fly out in right where bonefish is. I mean, they don't go chasing it. You have to put it almost right on their nose before they're going to hit. And that's, Ted, my dad always talked about that. He said Ted had just the greatest hand-eye coordination he ever saw.
Yeah,
His vision, where perfect vision is 20/20, Ted's was even better than that. His was 20/10.
Yeah. Well, which made him a great pilot too. I mean,
it sure did. Yes, it did.
And the skills that he had as a fisherman transcended to baseball. Lenny Randall told me that he went out fishing with Ted, and Ted would relate everything to baseball, everything in fishing, strength of your hands, how letting up and letting up on the bat or the pole, and then re-gripping it, and he was a marvelous teacher, according to Lenny Randall. And you're right, the hand-eye coordination with fishing is just the same as it is in baseball. And you're right, Ted Williams had 20/10 vision.
Yeah.
Right.
Now what they're doing with these laser surgeries, eye surgeries, I can't think of the name of it. There's a procedure for it. They'll transform your vision, and I'm sure you can you can go in there with 20/20 vision, and they'll give you 20/10 vision.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what, that's pretty amazing. I mean, Ted was born with it. I can tell you, he never had an operation. He just was one of those guys that.
Oh, absolutely not. But
yeah, right. But I mean, he was born. He was born with incredible reflexes, and he had that tremendous vision.
And a lot of it has to do with the wrists. Even in batting, wrists are.
Well, look at Hank Aaron.
Of course, the same thing with fly fishing.
Right.
It's all in the wrist.
Yeah, it is. And the other thing, David, it is in the wrist. And also, with Ted's vision, Mickey Vernon told me, and other people have told me, he said, Ted was able to pick up the ball as it left the pitcher's hand, and he would be able to make a split-second decision whether or not that ball was going to be in the strike zone where he wanted to swing. And if not, he would not swing. And a couple times
he would not swing at a ball.
No, he would not. He would not. If it was not in his strike zone, in his wheelhouse where he wanted that pitch, he would lay off it. He would not hit it.
Yeah, I had that umps, if they were, one way or the other, they couldn't determine whether the ball or a strike. It would depend on what Ted did. That's what they'd call.
I know. I'd heard that, David. Absolutely correct. Yep. Yeah.
I wondered, did he get in arguments with umpires? Was he famous for that? Or?
Well, I think he probably did. I mean, but I agree with what David said. I said sometimes an umpire would say, well, if Ted didn't swing, it must have been a ball. So,
yeah.
But I'm sure that on occasion he would be, called out on strikes or whatever, and I'm sure he would get into an argument. I mean, that's part of baseball. That's what hitters do. But, on the other hand, that was probably few and far between. And Ted, if you look at the statistics, you'll see that he did have a tremendous amount of walks during his career.
Oh.
And I'm sure he would get into an argument because he was right. In his own mind, he was always right to that kind of thing.
Right.
And he probably was in most cases. So if an umpire, as George said, if an umpire rung him up, unjustly, he would probably.
This is off the subject of nicknames, but I'm going to throw it at you guys. Do you remember when the strike zone was armpits to knees?
Yep.
Yes.
Right.
Sure do.
Right.
I sure do.
Am I mistaken, or in the rule book, is it still basically that? Because
I don't know. It
nobody
seems like
calls
it's changed.
a strike.
No, I don't think it has. I don't
know.
But,
it doesn't seem like it. It seems like it's changed.
That's one of my earliest memories of learning the game, listening to, Bill Allen on the radio, and he would call strike at the letters. And I would say, I remember saying, what does it mean, strike at the letters? And my father would have to explain that that's the uniform letters across the chest.
Right.
Right.
I personally think I think it's probably in the rule book.
Umpires took it upon themselves to develop their own strike zone. I know in the American League it was different because one of the two leagues had an inside chest protector for the umpires.
Right.
The other one didn't. And I can't remember which one it was.
The American League had an outside chest protector.
That big, heavy thing that they'd walk around with. Yeah.
Right.
And that would depend on where they position themselves behind the catcher. If you had an inside chest protector, you could be directly behind the catcher. If you had an outside chest protector, you had to move on one side or the other. And the American League had a reputation of I don't know whether it was high ball or low ball. One of the leagues, the umpires had a reputation for calling certain pitches, and it had to do with the positioning behind the catcher.
Well, that I could understand because of the physical nature of the protector. The vision that they get, looking over it and what have you. They're going to be obviously they're going to be a high ball strike at that point. But what I don't understand about the game and how it's changed is you never heard in the past, well, that's Augie Donatelli's strike zone as opposed to Paul Harvey's strike zone. Yeah, I'm just coming up with two umpires.
Wasn't it Doug Harvey?
But not the hockey player.
Wasn't it Doug Harvey?
Doug Harvey, yeah.
Yeah. Paul Harvey was a radio announcer.
Paul, yes. And that's the rest of the story.
Right. You did that very well, David.
Thanks.
Yes, you did.
If I can say something about the umpires, I mean, there's some umpires that have, what they call a short fuse. I mean, they'll eject a guy, for very little reason, and some of it depends on what that player calls an umpire. But a lot of umpires are very tolerant, of course, and now you see all kinds of the graphics and the slow motion and all this stuff with strike zones. I mean, umpires are human. We talked about this before, just like ball players, and they make mistakes. But there are certain umpires that will call certain pitches a certain way. And, I've seen umpires make horrible. I mean, I saw one not too long ago.
The host has
tape
joined
of a
the
guy
conference.
way outside, and the guy calls the strike three.
And that was cut off. I'm sorry.
Yeah, the ball player looked at the umpire like he was out of his mind, but he rang him up, and that was it. So that's part of the game.
What about the chances of getting automated balls and strikes called? The technology apparently is either there or can be adapted because we see the little box on the screen, now. Right. I would personally hate to see that, but read some inklings of that kind of thing being thought about, not introduced, but thought about.
Yeah, well, we've talked about those kind of technological innovations and all that stuff, David. I hope it doesn't. I mean, if that's the case, then you won't even need a home plate umpire.
Right, exactly. Except to call, when sliding home or something.
Well, play at the plate, I know, but I mean, on the other hand, you certainly don't need them in the background if all of a sudden they're calling up balls and strikes automatically.
Yeah.
No, I wouldn't like that. I wouldn't.
I would no. I don't think most
I have
baseball.
a friend of mine who used
fans.
to be a former umpire, American League umpire. His name is Al Clark.
Yeah, Al Clark's a friend of mine, Ronnie.
Is
Al
he?
Clark
Yeah,
from
he's a
Trenton,
friend of
New
mine
Jersey.
too.
Yep.
Yeah, he's a friend of mine too.
Yep.
And
he's been on
I had him
these
on
airwaves. I don't remember who
he
had
was
him
on with Peter and I one time.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, Al Clark was a long-time American League umpire. His dad used to be a sports writer for the Trenton Times. I know Al very well.
Yeah, he's a good guy. Good guy.
Did you grow
Should
up
I get
with
him on the show?
I don't even know. Tell you the truth, I don't even know where Al is now. I know that there was
He's in Virginia. He's in Virginia.
Yeah, there was a book written about Al not too long ago, and Al had some problems. But now I guess he's done quite well, and he had a reputation of being a very good American League umpire.
Yeah.
He was umpiring. I didn't know him personally when I was playing, but because he was not the same age. But on the other hand, Al had a very good reputation in baseball. It's just that unfortunately, he got involved in a baseball memorabilia, some kind of thing. And now everything has been taken care of. But Al had a very good reputation as an American League umpire.
He did. Would you like me to
now there's no difference between the two. I mean, the American and National League umpires are all part of the Major League Baseball.
Right. They should I try and get him on the show?
Yes, yeah, I would think if Ralph wanted to do it or whatever, I think that Al would be a good guest.
You guys get whoever you guys come up with to bring on, friends and what have you. It's always fine with me. And,
okay. Let me see what I can do.
Beautiful. That sounds
good. Ronnie, if you do, just mention that you and I are on together because Al will certainly know my name. So you go ahead and do that.
Okay, I sure will.
Yep.
I sure will.
Okay, Al Blumkin is not here today, so I have to mention Yogi Berra, speaking of nicknames.
Right.
And I saw on the Internet a picture of Yogi and Whitey being introduced to each other for the first time. And it said, Ed Ford, meet Larry Berra. That was right. That was the caption, and it made me laugh. I think Ed was getting out of the Army, or he came back to visit the clubhouse when he was in the Army, and whatever it was. It's a great photo and a great caption. With Whitey, it was obvious. White-haired guy. Richie Ashburn had a nickname, Whitey.
Whitey Lockman.
Whitey Lockman.
Whitey Lockman.
Here's a little trivia for you that I read in a book by Tom Meany about the Giants. What was Whitey Lockman's nickname as a kid? You know his name was Carol Lockman, and obviously I always thought of him as Whitey, but as a kid he was known as Pickles. So I wish there was stuff going on in my head that wasn't absolutely trivial nonsense.
Ralph, was that Pickles? Was that Pickles as in the pickle? I mean, he liked pickles, I guess, right?
I guess so.
Well, the reason I bring that up because the great pie trainer, his nickname Pie was because of his pies when he was a kid.
Oh, really?
He liked pie.
Right.
See, that's beautiful. I was hoping to get some idea of why some of these guys were nicknamed that. does, and I'm sure Al knows, and this is one of those moments I miss him terrifically when he's not here. What was the derivative of Lawrence Peter Berra's nickname, Yogi? How did that come about? Was it just he looked like a yogi, or he had wisdom? Anybody?
Well, that's a good one because I was thinking about that myself. Lawrence Peter Berra, and where the name Yogi came from, I have absolutely no idea.
You know, speaking of Eddie Ford, when he pitched that fourth game in the World Series against the Phillies, he was listed as Eddie Ford. That's what they called him. He hadn't become Whitey yet.
Yeah, I think I mentioned I have a program when there was a baseball dinner, and Whitey Ford was there with my dad, and the baseball dinner program says Ed, and then in parentheses Whitey Ford. So he was known as Ed Ford when he was in the military, and this was 1951.
Yeah.
Well.
And of course, 50. He pitched that game in 50. So
right. He pitched, and then he went into service for like a year or two, and then and then came back. Right.
Yeah. He's not in very good shape now. I saw him at the Old Timers game. I guess it'd be 2 years ago now. And poor guy, he just about made it out of the dugout, and he didn't go out onto the field like the other Old Timers. Yeah. It was. Yeah, it's sad when you see that. You know.
Yeah, it is.
You have such memories of these guys, and you remember them, and then suddenly, they can barely walk.
Just like the last time I saw Jackie. I mean, it was just shocking.
Right.
And he was in such bad shape. Blinded.
No, it is sad. It is sad, and Ronnie, you experienced it with Jackie. I mean, a lot of ball players are that way, and prematurely. And Jackie really had diabetes at a very early age. So, I mean, he passed away. What, he was in his 50s, I guess, was he?
53.
Yeah, right.
And apparently Le Grand Orange isn't doing very well now, too.
Yeah, I just saw that. David, do you know what happened? I just saw that this morning. They said he was in, very bad shape. And,
he's got
Rusty
kidney
Staub.
failure.
Rusty Staub, kidney failure.
Is that right?
Yeah, Rusty
Not
Staub,
responding well to dialysis, and his teammates, I'm going to quote, his teammates ask for prayers. And whenever you read something like that,
it's absurd.
Absurd, that's right.
Well, there's always hope. There's always hope, and I think Ronnie, you would recall. I mean, Rod Carew was in terrible shape.
Oh my God, he was.
And he was almost on death's door.
He was.
And he's had, I guess, a transplant or something, and he's doing.
He did have a heart
better.
transplant, and he's doing much better.
Right.
He looks better. I mean, he was very frail, and he was very peaked at a while, but he looks much better now.
Right. Good. Good.
Hey,
God bless him.
Jump back to Rusty Staub for a second. Two nicknames. Rusty itself was his nickname. His real name is Daniel. And I probably think it's because, do you guys remember the old Rusty dolls? The old rag dolls, redheaded dolls?
Raggedy Ann and Andy dolls?
Raggedy Ann and all that.
Right.
They were always redhead. I think that's where Rusty...
well, I guess he wasn't called Red because I guess his hair wasn't red. So maybe it was a rusted color.
And then there was Le Grand Orange, what they called him up in Montreal, with the big orange or...
Yeah, it was almost like a carrot color of Rusty's hair, and I think that's where the Le Grand Orange came from.
That's where it came,
Right.
Yeah, from the French.
He was with the Mets twice, and the second time they got him back coincided with my buying an Irish Setter puppy in Sacramento. I guess it must have been 77, 78. Seems like a long time ago. And I named my puppy Rusty when they got him back. That was a pretty dumb dog.
Well, I tell you, we were gonna name our dog Scooter because Phil Rizzuto was one of my favorite ball players, and he just died recently when we got our dog, who is now named Phil. And the reason we didn't name him Scooter was because at that time, Scooter Libby had sort of, denigrated the name.
Yeah, it sure did, David. You did the right thing.
Didn't want to call him Scooter,
right.
Because in this politically town here, you could call somebody Scooter, and they would say, "Oh, Scooter Libby."
That's right.
Well, Cheney did most of the degradation along those lines.
Oh yeah.
I mean, that was a big cover-up for him. And now, these guys look like angels compared to what we have going on now. And we lose sight of the fact that Bush invented ISIS, for instance.
Right.
So it isn't just Trump. We've had a series of bad stuff go down.
Yes, we have.
But Trump amplifies it for some reason.
Sure does.
And I have no doubt he will not throw out a ball at opening day.
He's not going to come out in public.
No, I guarantee you that's not going to happen.
That's a safe bet.
Yeah.
And I'm of mixed mind about that.
Policy.
I'm of mixed mind about that because as much as I dislike the man as president, I would love to see the tradition revived.
I would, David, I would too, but, unfortunately, where the political climate and everything else is just going to prohibit that. And, they're not going to want the president of the United States going out there to a chorus of boos. So, I mean, that's just not going to happen.
No, because I was at the game when George W. Bush threw out the first pitch, and when the Nationals, it was the first game, I think, at the new ballpark, if I recall correctly, or anyway, the first game of the season, and the booing was just overwhelming.
Right.
I mean, you could probably hear it all the way across in Maryland somewhere. And he wore a bulletproof vest.
A ball team back, that they would go back and have opening day in Washington, and that was the way it was all those years. And by getting the franchise back, you would think baseball would jump on that. And
well, you know what, Ralph? They I would like to say that I would hope that they would. Unfortunately, when Washington opened the season, they were an American League team, and so they would open a day ahead, and Cincinnati, a National League team, would open a day ahead. Now, the Nationals are a National League team, and Cincinnati is, so you'd have two opening days in the National League, and if that's what you want, that's fine. But Cincinnati was always given the honor because they were known as the first professional team. And Washington was given the honor in the American League because of the President of the United States.
Yeah, but George, don't forget, with the interleague play now, they could schedule an American League team to play in Washington on opening day.
No, they could. David, absolutely they could. I don't know the schedule makers. I have no idea. But, I mean, it used to be easy, what I'm saying.
Sure.
It used to
of
be
course,
easy to
you're
do.
right. Yeah.
Right.
It was a no-brainer, actually.
Right.
Now it's a bit more complicated.
Gentlemen, if Cincinnati were the first professional team, who did they play?
you got me, but I think they called them the first professional team because the players were paid. But who they played against, I have no idea.
They had to sit around and wait in extended spring training. Is there going to be a second professional team? I wonder about stuff.
Yep, I know.
Hey guys, this is terrific as usual.
This has been fun. Yeah, it's been fun.
It's fun. I think it was a good topic, and I just enjoy listening to you guys. Thank you for.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have each other so much too.
Yeah.
Good.
It works out great.
We will be back next week. Please look at some of the other shows on our network. David Hubler, for instance, and I, and Michael Preminger do a show called Bronx Roots on this network, and tune into that. David is special. I'm glad you're a part of this. George, you enjoy this. It took me a while to realize that. We've been doing it.
No, I do enjoy it. It's fun for me. I love to reminisce with you guys. It's great.
It wasn't stilted, but I didn't, for the first half of our year that we've been doing this, year or so, I felt that it was almost an effort for you. And I didn't realize that you were having fun too. So
well, yeah, Ralph, I appreciate that. I mean, I just my dad always told me that, if somebody wants to talk baseball, talk baseball. If they don't even bring it up. So I mean, I always had that in the back of my mind, and I love to.
And you and David are both an integral part of the Hal Bach show on this network. Ron is an integral part of the When the Bums and Gents, the 50s, entitled When the Bums and Gents Played in New York. And you guys all come together on different...
This week.
Yeah, we have a tour. We have Roy Firestone's going to be our guest later on in the week.
Yeah.
And Ronnie, let's talk about, just for a second, because especially David remembers the Carnegie Delicatessen.
Yes. Was that a great show?
Sure. It was. We had the former general manager.
Oh, wow.
Deli,
for 35 years.
And he talks some stories about, first of all, he's an avid baseball fan. He's a New York Giant fan and remembers, he's well up into his 80s. And he's got a memory that rivals ours here. And
he was really good.
To tell you the truth, the best part of doing this show for me, being 70, is that I have an example that the older you get, you don't have to lose it. You don't have to lose your memory. You don't have to lose your enthusiasm, your passion, your voice. All you guys sound like you're in your 40s.
Thank you.
Except me, I sound like I'm in my
only way.
Hey, we're all the same age, Ralph.
We are basically. We are. It gets to the point we're aged already.
Right.
And not aged, but we've aged.
Yeah.
We're cured.
I wanted to make one quick point about baseball nicknames. In no other sport are nicknames so prevalent. I mean, the real nicknames, not the ones that the sports writers give, like we just talked about, Pie Trainer and Whitey Lockman, that have carried them through their entire career and into their mature adult lives. There's no other sport that is like that. Baseball nicknames stick with these people, and we recognize them as such. And you don't find that in football.
Ronnie will tell you, I'm not a Dodger fan, but Junior Gilliam, when I was a kid, just calling him his name Junior, like we didn't know from Jim until for a long time. His baseball card had Junior Gilliam on it.
That's right.
So,
that's right.
We
had another character, Jack O'Halloran. That was pretty interesting too.
Yes, he was he was a former middleweight or heavyweight contender, former New York Jet. He was in training camp with the Jets. He was an actor. He's a very well spoken guy.
His father was Albert Anastasia.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, it was very interesting.
He had some stories to tell.
Oh, yeah. Oh, boy.
Nobody would mess with him, boy.
No.
No, you wouldn't want to. Yeah. We talked about the Kennedy assassination. It was unbelievable. just blew me away.
Well, a lot of theories to that one, and that we could talk for hours about that one.
Right.
Hey, guys, thank you again. David, at the bottom of the hour, we'll be doing a show.
Okay.
And I look forward to it.
I do, too.
Gentlemen,
any hint you're going to give us a hint?
Thank you, David, Ralph.
Hey, bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Always good talking to you. Bye-bye.
Take care.
All right. I'm going to push the button, and David and I will talk for a second off the air, unless you're not there. Okay, Audii, do me a favor. If you enjoy any of our offerings, this one or any of the shows, anything at all about our network, would you be so kind as to box up some lightly used children's books and take them to the Head Start program in whatever community you live? I would appreciate that. The kids would appreciate that. Kids need to read. They need to develop a passion, an imagination. They need to get their noses out of the devices and the games. They need to become school ready. It's got to start with the youth of America, as Casey would say. They are our future, and by taking those books to the Head Start program, it would really help society. I'd appreciate it. And Comfortably Zoned Radio Network, I'm Ralph Tyko, the weak link of it all, and we'll be back on In Case You're Wondering with George Case, next week. Thank you, everybody. It's fun. That's the name of the game. Adios.